Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to talk about the fuel tanks that I developed for the all-nation F3 and F7 engines. There's a number of fellows that are working to upgrade their engines, and I had gotten an inquiry from a club in California. And if you're familiar with these models, the original all-nations came. This is a dummy, unpowered, with what looks like the fuel tanks on the sides, but you turn it over, there's just wide open space. And on my models, I decided to upgrade my own because I wanted a little bit more detail. So I started out, and this model here in front of you, I had developed the platforms to replace the Bakelite, and this is a two-piece kit, and this assumes that you do not have the original rails that came with a lot of these kits. In fact, for a dummy, you probably don't need these rails. This is mainly for open frame motor mounts. But in any case, to give the tank stability, I created the bridge, and so the two-piece kit would be the platform that the tank mounts on with a couple of 440 screws. Later on, I developed the same tank, but at one piece, so you don't need to utilize screws to connect the tank to this bridge platform here. So, as you might know, somebody is going to request a fuel tank that accommodates a powered unit. Now, the All Nations may come with a towered drive and one truck that does the driving, or it could come with two towered drives, but in a lot of cases, and I have a couple engines where you got one towered drive on the end, and then you got a drive shaft that powers the second truck. And of course, you have to have quite a bit of swivel there if you're on curves, and you got universal joints here to accommodate that type of action without the engine binding on curves. Well, to develop a fuel tank, I took the original ones that I did here a number of weeks ago and re-engineered it. And so I'm going to come out with that kit, and today we're just going to talk a few things about how to utilize this kit and install it. So I had to give a lot of thought to how to design this tank to fit, and I started first with just developing it on a dummy unit with just the open frame motor rails here. And what I did is I developed the kit so that it basically has some grooves on the underside here, and it just snaps into place fairly simply, and you just adjust the frames. But by the same token, you still need to mount the tank to the rails. So I've come out with these spacers here with a couple of 440 screws again to do the mounting. And that's what we're going to talk about today. However, I did change this up a little bit on an engine that has the mechanism already installed, so that when you go to install the tank, that would be the last thing you would do to finish the model. You wouldn't have to necessarily install it on the frame and then mount it back in on the platforms with your 440 screws. So I did develop these, and I want to just give you a little rotation here so you can kind of see what we did in terms of hollowing it out so that the drive shaft can move in there without contacting the body of the fuel tank. And on this one, we'll be using on each of the corners 440 screws, and we'll move over to the drill press here in a moment and drill out these holes and tap them. Okay, we're at the drill press right now, and I've taken and selected a number 43 bit. I put it in the chuck, and I've set my depth so that I don't drill all the way through the other side. So in this sample that I've been using as a test, you can already see I've got a couple of screws already tapped with a spacer on the end. But really quickly, we'll turn on the drill here, and I'll show you how to drill out these pilot holes. Okay, the PETG plastic drills pretty nice, much better than PLA plastic. That's why I'm using it. And I've worked this up in the CAD program so that I could get as much space in here as possible. And you can actually see where I have a little space right in here, which you will see when I go to tap this, that you'll be able to see the screw go through there and beyond to hold the spacer piece down. And I'm going to show you with this particular 440 tap that it's relatively easy, and the fact that with the tap you want to try to make sure not to force it, and as it goes through you'll start to see it right here, and you may back it out to clear it. And it's that simple, really, to tap the screw. I usually go down to the depth right about like that. And so therefore I can take my 440 screw and I can set it in here. And what I would suggest is that when this is aligned, that you either put a little drop of glue under it or a little drop of glue right in here to secure it. And then of course you'll want to tap the aluminum rail for the 440 screws so you can mount this to the rail. Now, one caveat: when handling these parts, you will notice that they're a little bit on the delicate side and somewhat brittle, because you can see here I simply dropped this on the floor and it shattered a little bit and broke right here in the midsection. That's because I decided it was better to try to develop a tank where my tolerances were closer and try to use less material in order to get the right look, the right fit, and to give that drive shaft as much clearance as possible. In the solid tank, this space here is all printed out, so it's very solid, and the part does not, you don't risk breaking the part midsection. Having said that, I haven't had too much trouble. I've been careful. And I want to show you the difference between the first one that I just dropped in place on a non-powered unit on the rails and this one here, where it's totally carved out right on here so it sits on the rail. And the reason I did that is if you look at the rails on a non-powered, they're perfectly parallel. When you drop an open frame motor in, it tends to spread the rails out a little bit. So this initial tank that I developed didn't want to sit right on the rails with an open frame motor. So I made the modification so that it would fit right in there. And so this drops down, and what you would do after you have drilled these holes out and tapped them, I am providing a variety of spacers of different thicknesses, ranging from 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, and 4 millimeters in thickness, because there's always this variability with some of these models. In other words, you may have your frame sitting on a thinner Bakelite, and the distance between the tank and the frame is going to be a little bit different than if you were to use the power truck platforms that I've been printing, which are just a tad thicker than the Bakelite. I happen to like these a little better, but if there's that variability, you have enough sets here to make sure that the tank, when it finally sits in there, is flush. You know, so it'll look correct, and it's not hanging too low, and it's not too deep. If you're going too deep, you risk having the shaft touch the tank when you're operating the engine. So that's real quick what I wanted to go over today for some of the folks that are following me on this. And oftentimes when building a model, it seems like the second time you do it, it's a charm, or you see a way of improving upon your work. In this case, doing the design work on this fuel tank for the drive shaft version, I noted earlier in the video that this particular part had broke, and so I went back to the CAD program to reevaluate my design and improve upon it. That improvement was to increase the thickness across here, add material. I added material in the midsection here, and also a little bridge across here. Now that bridge is 0.5 millimeters in thickness, and if your drive shaft is somewhat larger diameter and it doesn't clear, you can actually nip this here and here and take that bridge out. It's really not serving so much as improvement of strength. Rather, I was hoping that you wouldn't see the drive shaft and the gap here, so it gives the modeler an opportunity to make a decision here. But in any case, I beefed all this up, so I don't anticipate any more breakage and improvement on this part. And particularly on my models, I like to try to have get the best design possible, and so this is what I'm going to make available in the kit. I hope you like this video. I hope you make some comments, share it, click like, and please subscribe. Here are several of my locomotives turned upside down, just to give you a little contrast and comparison. This one here is a dummy non-powered unit with no fuel tank, very hollow. The second one here has my platforms with the original brass or aluminum rails or brackets here for open frame motor mount, with the new fuel tank for a drive shaft version. The third one here is actually has a drive shaft version just like the one here. It's using Central Locomotive Works universal joints, so you get an idea on the size of the tubing here between the joints. I've seen some drive shafts where they're even smaller in diameter, depending on how the modeler decided to power the unit. The tank here fits very nicely on top of the rails. We have the spacers available so that you can get the exact adjustment as far as the insert of the tank goes between the tank sides. And of course, this is the original one I did, which is a two-piece kit with the platforms and all the screws. So that just to give you a little idea of where we're going with it and how we progressed. And I think you'll have a lot of fun putting this together.